Tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump sent shockwaves across global markets. Many national leaders deemed them undesirable and ridiculous. Many countries' markets momentarily plunged into free collapse. The United States' two most significant neighbors, Canada and Mexico, reacted the most strongly to Trump. Trump dismissed the reactions as inconsequential, arguing that they were very normal for MAGA, but he was extremely upset by Canada's conduct. Trudeau replied by introducing retaliatory taxes on around $106 billion in U.S. imports. Approximately $20 billion of it was to be administered on Tuesday. Trudeau stated, "We will stand strong for Canada. We will stay firm to guarantee that our countries remain the finest neighbors in the world." However, on Monday afternoon, the Canadian Prime Minister said that the proposed tariffs will be suspended for at least 30 days, following a positive chat with Trump. After placing 25% tariffs on most items from Canada and Mexico, as well as 10% tariffs on China, President Donald Trump tweeted passionately about his actions over the weekend, focusing specifically on Canada. In a statement, President Donald Trump stated that Americans will suffer some pain as a result of the burgeoning trade war provoked by his tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, and that Canada would cease to exist without a trade surplus with the U.S. In a social media post, Trump particularly attacked Canada, prompting retaliation. Trump levied a 25% tariff on Canadian imports and a 10% charge on oil, natural gas, and electricity. Canada has levied 25% tariffs on more than $106 billion worth of U.S. goods, including booze and fruit. Trump criticized Canada's trade surplus with the United States. "We don't need anything they have. We have unlimited energy, we should build our own cars, and we have more lumber than we can use," he said. Despite Trump's claim that the United States does not require Canada, Canada supplies 1/4 of the oil that the United States consumes on a daily basis. Trump argued that without this surplus, Canada would be unable to continue as a functioning country. As a result, he suggested that Canada become our valuable 51st state. The Canadian people will benefit from much cheaper taxation and improved military protection, and there are no tariffs. Canada's ambassador to Washington stated that the United States had a $75 billion trade deficit with Canada last year, but added that energy exports account for 1/3 of what Canada sells to the United States and that a deficit emerges when oil prices rise. Canada accounts for around 60% of the United States crude oil imports. However, the reaction of American corporations, Canadian and Mexican governments, and terror among domestic consumers temporarily reversed the flow. President Trump had to strike a large and beautiful deal with Canada and Mexico to temporarily halt import taxes. But why is this agreement happening now? Is the trade war fully over? In another blow to woke liberals, the president has negotiated substantial compromises that will undoubtedly make America great. At least that is what local news outlets will say for the next 7 days, as the regime's damage control efforts continue. In actuality, Trump appears to have caved to pressure when it became evident that Canada and Mexico would not give up on the trade war without a fight. What lies beneath this peaceful acceptance? Let's take a deeper look at the recent developments between the United States and Canada to understand what's going on in the newest round of tariff negotiations. As you may know, Trump imposed a 25% tax on imports from Mexico and Canada, as well as a 10% levy on Canadian oil, gas, and electricity. Following this action, Canada replied without hesitation. Canada's tit-for-tat reprisal of a 25% tariff had a significant impact on the corridors of Washington. Donald Trump was compelled to back down after being surprised by the response. Mr. Trump agreed to halt his tariff threats against Mexico and Canada, two of the U.S.'s largest trade partners, for 30 days. Mexico and Canada have made efforts to allay President Trump's fears about border security and the introduction of prohibited chemicals. Canada has committed to implementing a $1.3 billion border security plan that includes new helicopters, technology, and personnel, deploying nearly 10,000 frontline personnel for border protection, forming a United States-Canada Joint Strike Force to combat organized crime, and investing $200 million in new intelligence initiatives. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau claimed he had a positive meeting with President Donald Trump and that tariffs will be deferred for at least 30 days. However, for many people across the country, the idea of a trade war between longtime partners is fueling anger, worry, and concern about the future. Trump's tariff threat has also sparked concerns about the nature of the cross-border relationship, prompting demands for Canada to look outside the United States to more dependable foreign partners while increasing domestic trade. Still, these pauses give a respite after a dramatic few days that pushed North America to the verge of a trade war that threatens to destroy economic development, send prices flying, and ruin two of the United States' most important relationships. The interim halt prevents a sudden trade war between the U.S. and Canada, which traded $746 billion in products in 2022. So what were Canada-U.S. ties like prior to the tax dispute? For decades, the United States and Canada have maintained tight political and commercial links. According to U.S. Census data, the U.S. exported over $322 million in products to Canada last year. It also bought more than $377 million in commodities from its northern neighbor. Over 3/4 of Canada's total trade exports go to the United States. The country is also the top foreign energy provider to the United States, with about 97% of Canadian crude oil exports heading south of the border by 2023. However, Mr. Trump, who has often criticized Canada since his re-election in November, claimed the tariffs were required to persuade the Canadian government to halt illegal migration across the U.S. border. Mr. Trump said that the duties were designed to balance the trade imbalance with Canada, which he referred to as a subsidy. We know that the parties' relationships have been strained in the past. Tensions have risen over Canada's unwillingness to engage in the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, as well as personal hostility between former U.S. President John F. Kennedy and Canadian Prime Minister John Diefenbaker in the early 1960s. However, many believe that current trade tensions have brought the relationship to a low point. With Trump signing the order authorizing tariffs on Canada and Trudeau proposing reciprocal measures, we are seeing a rise in nationalist feeling in Canada. The United States national anthem was booed at hockey and basketball games in Canada over the weekend, and several provincial officials urged the people to purchase Canadian in response to the tariffs. Liquor outlets in British Columbia are complying with a provincial government directive to cease selling alcohol from Republican-controlled states. The decision has resulted in bare shelves at several government-run beer outlets. The province's response is consistent with previous actions taken by Ontario and Nova Scotia, which have directed provincial liquor outlets to remove American beer. The American people and media are also realizing that tariffs have become a risk. On the same day Donald Trump surrendered to Mexico and then Canada, a YouGov survey revealed that 67% of the American population believes that rising U.S. tariffs will raise the prices of items they typically purchase. Almost any publication or media outlet will tell you that Trump's tariffs will destroy the American economy and the fortunes of the majority of the country's poorer citizens. Every day, multiple stories are published showing how Trump's tariffs would raise the cost of food and household appliances, bankrupt the North American car industry, raise the cost of drugs and pharmaceutical items, or make it difficult to build or repair a home. Tariffs indeed harm exporters in other nations, but they are also enormously harmful to themselves. This is why the United States has pursued a bipartisan strategy of lowering tariffs throughout the post-war period. Americans are also learning how to retaliate. Part of Trump's extortion strategy is threatening even greater tariffs if another country dares to react. He forgets that they too have internal politics, and so he must reply to his rubbish. Furthermore, foreign trade policy specialists enjoy the intellectual challenge of determining a suitable reprisal. Just because Trump threatens his general approach does not imply that other nations should respond in the same rash manner. Because not every country obtains the same products from the United States, why impose a needless tariff on something you do not purchase? Instead, they concentrate on the critical items they purchase from us that they might easily obtain from other providers. They might also focus their attention on items from certain regions of the United States. There is reason to assume that the retaliatory packages being developed by Canada and Mexico will target exporters in Republican congressional districts in order to cause division and unhappiness among Trump supporters. They may also target items from firms that have made significant contributions to Trump. It is not necessary to react in kind. It does not have to be tariffs. It does not even need to be called retribution. We've seen governments delay down customs processing for perishable commodities burning on a sunny pier. Product standards, testing, and certification might take many weeks or months. Companies may be required to divulge intellectual property secrets before their items are permitted entry. Small inaccuracies in documentation or labels of origin, for example, that would ordinarily be disregarded, might quickly become show-stopping issues. Another thing to remember is this: the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Pact will be revisited next year. Article 34.7 of the USMCA mandates the U.S., Canada, and Mexico to conduct a joint review of the agreement on July 1, 2026. You now have a fair notion of what Trump will learn from this review. He should think on how he tormented Mexico and Canada and came out on top. It makes little difference whether the United States has genuinely profited or not. What important is that he has something he can use to declare victory. Don't believe for a second that the trade battle with Mexico and Canada is ended. So what should the Democrats do about this? They should have acknowledged the splits in the Republican ranks on tariffs. Several senators, notably Rand Paul and Ron Johnson, have come out strongly against them. Republican legislators are not afraid to repeat the Democratic claim that tariffs are tariffs. It is easy to see why the GOP is divided. Tariffs harm numerous businesses, and not everyone in the Republican mega-donor camp is pleased about them. These funders will compel senators and politicians to speak out against tariffs. If Democrats truly want to protect people from the negative impacts of tariffs, and if they want to prevent Trump from repeating the calamity of the 2018 to 2020 trade war at a time when agricultural bankruptcies are soaring, they must raise the voices of Republicans who oppose tariffs. All they have to do is keep tariffs as a secondary priority, ahead of immigration and tax cuts, and never allow Trump off the hook. Keep up the pressure. Otherwise, it wounds deeply. Thank you for tuning in.